Actually, I thought that I do the most uncomfortable thing that I could possibly do right now in my personal situation, because I have a great job that I really liked. I work in a corporate communication agency and I really like the job, and I have a relationship, and I thought, well, it's hard to organize a relationship when you're going to two different cities, and I choose to go out of this very nice, calm situation, going into a parliament or in a new surrounding where people would doubt that I'm there, that they think that as a young woman I don't have space there because I'm young and I'm a woman. So going out of my comfort zone was a very, very big thing in this decision-making process, that European values, that we cannot agree on protecting people from drowning in the Mediterranean Sea. We let people actually die as a European project because there are some egos and European leaders that cannot agree on a consent. This is the problem. You can really notice that if you are aggressive, if you are loud, you are more heard. So this is a problem that we have to change in our political culture as a whole, that only the ones who are loud and aggressive, that they can be heard.
Hello again, it's Young Europe. We are today in wonderful Hamburg, in the wonderful Zeitcafé. And I have a super exciting and interesting guest today. I would kindly ask you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm very happy to be here with you. I'm Delara Burkhardt. I'm 26 years old and I'm candidate for the Sozialdemokratische Partei of Germany for the European Parliament.
Cool. Was it your goal as a teenager to become a candidate for the European Parliament for the Social Democrats?
Well, not at all. Like, if you would ask me, I wouldn't have thought that last year that I would be a candidate. So it was definitely not one of my plans. And when I joined the party, I was 15 years old. And the first thing I actually did was campaigning for the European election. And I would never thought that 10 years later I would run by myself. So not at all a plan.
Okay. Where are you from?
I'm from Sieg. It's close to Hamburg, actually. It's in the north of Germany. Okay. The region is called Schleswig-Holstein. It's in the north, between Hamburg and Denmark, actually.
And you enter it, I assume you enter it at your hometown in your party, at the Social Democratic Party. Could you explain maybe how was it up to grow up there? How was maybe also your first contact with the European Union, your first memory about the European Union?
So my region where I'm from, it's very different, different in every region, because where I come from, it's close to Hamburg. It's kind of suburban, and you're actually close to Hamburg, and with a lot more diversity and and in the everyday life. While when you are more in the north or in the west, in my region, you have a more rural area, so it's very different. But the first contact I actually remember from the European Union is that I had to learn to write the Euro sign in the class when I was in the second grade, and I remember discussing with my parents that I thought it was very unfair that I got, instead of 1 D-mark pocket money, I only got 50 cents, and we had a huge discussion, and my father was like, but you will notice the benefit if you go abroad. If we go on vacation, you will have money you can pay with and otherwise. So the euro was the first time I got in touch with the European Union, actually.
So you grew up close to the border of Denmark, right? How was it to grow up close to Denmark? Was there any? What's your memory on that?
Well, like everyone who's from my region, they usually go to Denmark for vacation, to go to the Baltic or to the North Sea. And I actually remember that I don't remember that we switched countries, because the only thing is that when you drive 2 hours from my hometown to the border of Denmark, you don't know that there is a border, because you continue on driving, and then you only recognize that when you are in Denmark, the streets get a little bit better. It's not so slippery anymore. So this is kind of a funny experience, that you don't know that you're switching countries because there's no border, and this is what I got used to. Yeah.
How did you how old were you when you entered the Social Democrat Party?
I was 15. Yeah.
Okay, and how did it came to that? Like, how did you hear from the Social Democratic Party? What was the motivation to enter, like, with 15 years a party?
Well, on that time where I got interested in the discussions we had at school in the geography class. We were talking about globalization, and I read a lot about NGOs like Oxfam who fight for ending world poverty. So I had a political mind to that point. And then there was something starting. There were school strikes in my region, because the time you go to school was shortened. So we had to learn the same stuff within a shorter time. And I thought it's unfair that there was a decision made about the future of our generation, about my future, and I wasn't able to talk within that. So there were school strikes all over Schleswig-Holstein, where I'm from, and I saw that there were flags from parties that were solidaric with the protest, and I asked actually my father, because he was political active. He was in the Social Democratic Party too, but he's not anymore. And I asked him, how can I make a difference? How can I raise my voice if I want to change something like this? And he said that the parties have youth wings, and you can join them. And then I actually decided myself. I read in the internet about the values and the goals of the parties, and I came to the Social Democratic Party to join them. Yeah.
And what did you like about this party specifically? Because there are also other parties.
It's the vision of society they have, that Social Democrats strive for a world where everyone has empathy and is feels like we are in a solidarity union, that everyone has to care about each other. We want everyone to be free and to have equal chances and possibilities to fulfill their dreams, and that we want a society that is based on the human and not on economic interests. And this is actually what I thought as a whole vision, and that this is the kind of society I want to live in, and this is why I decided to join the party, to strive for this society. Yeah.
Okay, if you think about the values and the vision of the party and the region, or if you think about Schleswig-Holstein, what would you say? Are you close there to this goal, or are you far away from that?
Well, we see that there is a growing gap in our society, that we have also in rural areas problems with housing, that we have, especially in the cities, problems with housing, that people who lived in cities, they cannot afford to live there anymore, and they have to move abroad. That's something that actually in the region where I'm from, we experience very hard, because we have Hamburg directly next to us, and the people can't afford anymore to live in Hamburg because the price for housing is so high, and they move in the suburbs. So there the prices go up too. So I think this is a core social question, and we are having a growing gap in the society among that. Who can afford to live in cities? This is a huge failure. And also, if we talk about the wages of people, we see that there's hardly any development, although the economy is growing, and there should be some workers being part of it. So it's not fair that we as workers, we don't benefit from the growth and that we work for. So I think there are social dialects, can you say that, things that don't match with what is happening, and this is a social gap we have to close.
So there's a gap between prosperity and income of people. Yeah. What did you decide to do, like, after your A level?
A level, like after finishing school, right?
Yeah. After you finished school.
Well, I spent a lot of free time on working in the party, and also organizing civil society movements against right wing, against or for feminism, and I really actually have been political aware. I got more and more political aware, and I decided that I want to get more knowledge about the society we live in. So I decided to study sociology after my A-level, which also, of course, has a political implication. Because I would say, okay, you can say it's basic science, but you also have, I think, a vision if you decide to study something like sociology, that you want to have a deeper understanding about the functions of society. So I studied sociology, and I had the possibility to work for MP in the regional parliament of Schleswig-Holstein, which was very cool because I got also the freedom to organize my studies with political engagement, which is not very easy because it takes a lot of time. And I kind of, and I couldn't actually, if I wouldn't have had a scholarship from the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, which is like a foundation dedicated to social democratic values here in Germany. And I think that if I wouldn't have the chance to have the scholarship, I wouldn't have couldn't have continued being politically active within my studies, because my parents couldn't afford to help me with doing my studies. So I had, So I'm very happy that I had the possibility, because I was politically active. I could stay politically active because I got the support from the scholarship, and yeah.
Cool. Because you mentioned your parents, I've read something. Maybe you can explain it. Are you both parents from Germany, or?
No, my she's from Iran. When she was 18, her mother flew with her 6 children to Germany because they were political refugees from Iran. It was about 30 years ago, and actually the plan was to continue to the US, because a lot of family from Iran, my family lives in the US, but they fell in love with Hamburg actually, and they stayed here. So my mom is from Iran. She was a refugee.
Okay, and what do you know about back then, the political situation of where your mom or her family has to flew to go away to move to another country?
So my grandparents, they were royalists. My grandfather, he was in the military for the Shah, and after there was the shift in power, my grandfather got killed, and it was not safe for my family to stay in Iran, and they wanted to live, and they decided to seek for asylum.
Okay. What did you do, while you studied and while you worked in the regional parliament? What did you do at the party? What kind of function did you have? And you were not only engaged in the party, but also in the youth organization of the party, of the Youth Socialists, right?
This was basically the main thing I was doing. I had first started in my hometown, then I went to the region, and since 3 years now I'm in the national board of the Young Socialists, which is the youth wing of the Social Democratic Party. And I did so much. When I was in my region, as I said, I was mainly working in civil society movements together with the trade unions, because I haven't only worked for the regional parliament. I also worked for the unions, the trade unions, while I was studying. So I did that when I was in the region, and I also always were doing international activities, exchange with our partner organizations from all over Europe, because also worldwide, because we in Schleswig-Holstein we are at the Baltic Sea, and we have a lot of member states from the European Union, but also Russia, whose borders we are connected within the Baltic Sea, and we had the opportunity to have youth exchange within the Baltic Sea states, and discuss different policy issues which affect all of us together. And when I was switching to the national level, I actually did a lot I only mainly did international work because we have a project as USOs together with progressive organizations from Israel and Palestine and Jerusalem, where we make political encounter between young people to discuss, of course, the conflict, but also have the opportunity to meet on an eye-to-eye level and building trusts to be to have bridges between maybe future leaders who can be part of peace. So this is also what affected me most, that I always had the opportunity not only to stay in the German borders of politics. I always had the opportunity to work together with amazing people who make politics in very, very less privileged situation than we do in Europe. You have to say.
It's as far as I know, it's really time consuming to be engaged at youth organizations or at political parties. So maybe could you describe like what's really motivating about it to invest so much time, and maybe also like what's the difference between being engaged in the youth socialists and at the normal socialists, at the Social Democratic Party?
Well, what motivates me most is that that I can meet people who are willing to discuss how policies can make a change to society. That and I think it's especially in the young generation that we define our surrounding as changeable. That we see this in the youth movements we have right now, like all the young people on the streets. Over 1 million or almost 2 million people all over the world, young people that demand climate actions against climate change. That we believe in democracy and we want to change policies to make our future better. So I think this motivates me, that the vision of that we can change something and it's not everything given. And what I experience in the party is of course that we want this too, but sometimes there's like more the realistic approach about, well, you are young and you can have your ideals, but we have to think also what is the next step. Well, of course you have to do this, but I think what makes a party is a vision on where they want to go to. And if you lose a vision and always try to control the little steps the next little steps that are ahead, you kind of lost as a party, because you don't know where to go if you don't see the big picture. And I think this is maybe something that youth wings and the mother parties, how we call them, they sometimes maybe lose it if they need the push from the youth. And this is why it's so important that young people go into politics, because we more idealistic, I would say.
More idealistic. Is it hard to be young and to be engaged in a party?
Yes, of course, because politics as a whole is a sphere where young people are misrepresented. There's we don't enter party as much. Actually, a lot of people don't enter parties right now, but this is another problem. But we are like less represented in parties, so it's a problem, and you notice it in the fact that you kind of seeking attention if you are there as a young woman, especially, and I think it's sometimes hard to be taken serious, to be taken as a fully political subject. I think I exchanged with people from other parties too, so this is a huge problem that we are seen as the young, and you have to grow up if you want to understand what's going on. So you have to do more to be taken serious than like some average aged person.
As a young person in general, but also as a woman.
Yeah.
Can you share some experience being as a young woman engaged in politics? Is it difficult? Are there barriers? So what would you say, what are the barriers and what are your personal experience towards that?
It's basically not to be taken serious. And I can give different examples for that. So I recognize that I changed the way I dress, for example, when I go to party congresses. When I was 15, I usually like wore dresses or skirts, and every time I wear a dress or a skirt at a party congress, but also like when I was working in the parliament, they were saying, "Oh, you look cute, a pretty dress," and you always like putting low. So I think like it's sexism. It's sexism you face all over the society. You also face it in the parties and the politics, because it's a system. It's not some one something that is restricted to one area. You can find it in politics, and I really noticed that the culture of discussion is something that is very male. So I don't have a very loud voice. I have maybe a higher voice than the usual person that is speaking on a party congress, and you can really notice that if you are aggressive, if you are loud, you are more heard. So this is a problem that we have to change in our political culture as a whole, that only the ones who are loud and aggressive, that they can be heard. It's actually should be, and I think that talking more slow and more thoughtful and more quiet doesn't change political output. It changes the way how people can be part of it. And if you always well, I think this is my point, that I want to change political culture because politics are very male dominated.
Okay, I get this point. What would you say you have to be aggressive and loud in politics? How do you balance this out, since you made it to a high spot on the list for the upcoming European Parliament or for the elections? How do you balance not being loud and not being aggressive with what other type of skills or skills or experiences?
Well, maybe it's passion about what I believe in and what I want to achieve, and it's also the sensibility that my party had, that we recognize that we have a problem if we don't have young women on our list, because it has the actual result that young women don't feel represented by us as a party. So also, like, this is why I was given this place on the list, because as youth we said we don't have any woman under the age of 50 on our list, so we are missing actually 2 generations representation. So as we as a party are in a renewal process right now, and we say that we want to be more young, we want to be more female, we want to be more diverse, then we actively have to change the way we put up our lists. And this is why I like the passion, of course, for my subjects, and and the possibility or the awareness of my party that we have to change something about our list put me on this place.
Okay. So the youth organization or the young socialists, they don't have fixed spots on the list. It's always from election to election. It's a negotiation process, or
Yes.
Okay. So you have been you mentioned it. You have been in international delegations. You traveled around a lot for the youth organization to meet young socialists from other countries.
Not only young socialists, also civil society groups, NGOs. So, for example, I was in Tunisia with a group of young NGO activists from Libya, and it was like one of the most intense experiences, because I had to explain what parties in Europe mean. That parties are linked to ideology, to a political movement. For example, the social democracy, the workers' movement, and they really couldn't get it, because in their political landscape, parties are an instrument for single persons to gain power, and they really didn't recognize how this could be a movement, a political movement. It was one of the most intense things I experienced, to see that it's not taken for granted that you have something like democratic culture so much planted in a society that's was kind of a crazy experience. But yeah, and also NGOs, that's was my point.
Okay. NGOs and from other parties. And where have you been? Like you mentioned Tunisia and Libya.
Yeah.
What countries else you have been, and what did you learn there and see there, except the point you already mentioned?
Well, a lot. I've been in Russia. I've been in Hungary. I've been in Italy, Spain, and most recently in Bosnia. And maybe I start with Bosnia-Herzegovina because this was one very like also European awareness I had, because as we know that we always miss out that on that point when we talk about Europe, the European Union being a project of peace and securing peace over 70 years now on the continent. We had actually war on the continent, which wasn't too long ago, and there was just one moment that I was in Sarajevo, and there was a driver who took me to the airport, and he stopped with me on the way to the airport, and we made it to the tunnel where Sarajevo was, where food and everything was brought to Sarajevo during the war. And the man, he walked through this tunnel because he was bringing food for his family. So this awareness that the peace on the continent is not taken for granted, and it hasn't been there forever. This was something that really, like, also when I think about the European elections, came very close to my mind, that, well, it's not taken for granted that we have peace. So this was the most recent thing. But actually, like you said, all the countries where I've been, of course, every time you have some things that...
You said, like, Russia and Hungary, both countries, especially in politics, often subject. They are often discussed, like, in both countries, the governments have a different approach to democracy. What did you see there?
Well, I actually met, of course, with opposition parties mostly, and the freedom of press is something that when I think about how we work with press and what important role the freedom of press has for a democratic society, this is something that's comes into your mind when you think about Hungary. If you think about how leaders like Orban, that they have a benefit of how they address different topics in the media, how they can overcome the real problems people facing, that they don't talk about closing the gap between the poor and the rich, and talking about how to save social security systems, that you don't, as an opposition, you don't have the possibility to reach out to this injustices, because you have the power to determine what is told about policies and that are made. This is something that I have very close in my mind when I think about that the freedom of press is essential and crucial in having a democratic debate. And if you don't have it, you don't have the possibility to reach out as an opposition party. So good.
So you visit different countries and different NGOs. You have been also found on the internet, or you are also engaged in an organization closely related to Jerusalem and to Israel. Could you maybe tell us something about that, and what did you learn about that? And
it's the Willy Brandt Center. It's a center of political encounter for young people. It was founded over 20 years ago during the Oslo peace process, where progressive young people from Israel, Palestine, and Germany came together and found this project. And what it is now is that it's still, and I think it's very, like, we know how the conflict gets tense, and we are far from having a two-state solution. But the project is built on this idea of this vision to have a two-state solution, and having political young activists meeting on an eye-to-eye level, which gets more tense every day, of course, but it's still there that we have this trilateral activities, that we make room and we have a safe space where young people can talk about policies, not only about the conflict, also about things that unites them.
Could you maybe say what's the role and what's the goal of the Willy Brandt Center in Jerusalem?
It's a project founded by the users and young progressives in Israel and Palestine. And the political belief is that we want to have partnership, want to have dialogue on an eye-to-eye level, a political counter to secure peace in the region. And it was founded in a time where the Oslo peace processes were there, and the reality of a two-state solution was much more closer than we have it now. But still, we can make it possible that young people from Israel and Palestine meet and talk on an eye-to-eye level on the conflict, but also, of course, about policy issues that affect people in the region. And I think it's very important that we have dialogue, as we know, and the project is based on the belief that violence won't bring peace in the region at any time.
Okay. I wonder, like, coming back to you candidating as a member of the European Parliament, how did it came to that? Like, why do you want to be a member of the European Parliament, not of, let's say, of the regional parliament in Schleswig-Holstein or of the German parliament in Berlin?
Well, it's actually both. It has an inner party view and a Europe as a whole view. When I think about Europe as a whole, we have the situation that our generation is the generation that grew up on a uniting continent, on the uniting project. And this security is not there anymore. As right-wing populists get stronger and stronger, and we see it in every election. They even part of governments right now in the European Union, and they want to roll back. They want Europe to go back in the golden age of national states, and we as a generation we have the very core identity that there are just problems that can be solved together, like challenges we face in a society, in a globalization, that migration, the climate change, digitalization, it doesn't it's possible to do it in a closed national state. You have to find international solutions, and that we want to I want the European story to go on, and I don't want to roll back just because some people think it's too complicated to think about solutions that are international. So this is my motivation, that I don't want right-wing populists to tell the future of the European idea. I want our generation to talk about it, and of course the European level is the level where you have to start it. And also I think that we see with the rise of the right-wing populists, we also saw that Social Democratic Party all over Europe lost the trust of the voters, and I think it's kind of because as Social Democrats we lost kind of how to set an agenda for the continent, because we always reacted on the attacks from the right. When we talk about the migration policies, we only reacted on what right-wingers were demanding, and we tried to make it more soft and not too hard. When there was an economical crisis on the continent, we also, as Social Democrats, proposed neoliberal, supported neoliberal policies, for example, the austerity politics after the crisis. And we did it because we kind of lost the vision on that we actually want radical change for Europe, because we want Europe not to be a neoliberal market. We want Europe to be a society of equal people. And this both the situation on the European continent, but also the lack of braveness of Social Democratic Party to actively demand change now, and this is what made me run for the European Parliament.
Okay, if you think like about other European countries, do you see some social democratic parties where you say, they are really cool. They're doing it really right in the sense of positive, good. And do you see some parties where do you think, oh, they should not call themselves social democrats, or they are not doing it very well relatable to social democratic values?
Well, I think there's a huge transition all over the social democratic parties, and I think like the destinies of the German and the Austrian parties being in grand coalitions is kind of the same. So I can relate to that, of course, a lot. But what I think is wrong in talking about different crises we faced is the political agenda setting. So, but I think it's a part of the discussion. Of course, there are total democratic parties like in Romania, where I think there is a very critical approach, and also how they got into power. And I really have a critical eye on that. But as a whole, I think it's kind of things we have to negotiate right now. As I cannot relate to Swedish social democrats how they want to solve the migration crisis, because they say that we should strengthen camps outside of Europe where people can seek shelter there instead of making them flee to Germany to Europe. I think it's wrong, because I think Europe has the duty to, as a peace project, to take people who seek shelter, and it's kind of, but we will talk probably later about it. But that there are, and also the Labour Party in the UK, that I really think it's sad that they didn't make the point that that we need Europe to answer the social gaps that they were addressing in the UK, that there's not enough social security, that the pensions and the wages are not growing, that they are actually at danger. So they didn't actively enough promote European solutions, and this is what I also cannot say it's good, because I would have wished that it was the Labour Party that had a more pro-European approach, and yeah, I didn't see that happening. So I think there's a lot of things we, as Europe, it's crazy to organize with national parties to organize something like a European narrative, but I think it has to happen now, definitely.
How was coming back to candidating as a parliament? How was the decision-making process of that when you thought about, I would like to candidate for that? It was like, what are the chances of that, and what were the doubts you maybe had?
Yeah. So actually, I thought that I do the most uncomfortable thing that I could possibly do right now in my personal situation, because I have a great job that I really liked. I work in a corporate communication agency, and I really like the job. And I have a relationship, and I thought, well, it's hard to organize a relationship when you're going to two different cities. And I choose to go out of this very nice, calm situation, going into a parliament or in a new surrounding where people would doubt that I'm there, that they think that as a young woman I don't have space there because I'm young and I'm a woman. So going out of my comfort zone was a very, very big thing in this decision-making process, that really, it was a thing that I thought, okay, I could have been easy. I could stay in the workplace where my qualities and my abilities are they are taken worth, or I go to somewhere where everyone will doubt me. And the urgency of young people being involved in telling how the future of the European project should be right now, because it's in danger. This made me and the personal responsibility as being in the national board of Young Socialists, and having the network and the possibility to be part of the European Parliament. I thought that I always can say that other people could do it. Other young people should go and do it and run for office, or if I do it. And I thought I have the possibility. I can do it now, and I have to do it. So this was actually the thing. Being very honest.
How did you you just mentioned relationship? how did your environment react to that? Like your parents, your family, friends, your colleagues from the Youth Socialist?
They thought it's cool because yeah, they were very supportive. They were thinking were actually I didn't had anyone who said, "Oh, Delara, you should think about it." They were very supportive, where I was in doubt sometimes. But yeah, they were supportive, and I also receive a lot of empowerment. That, like when I was, for example, at school discussions, young women texting me on Instagram that they find it inspiring that young women run for the European Parliament, and I think, okay, it might be also like something like a door opener, and to make it more present for young women, that there is the possibility that we can run for parliament, and this is like the motivation I get from the reactions, because it's just positive in my surroundings. Of course, there are
Okay.
haters on the internet.
I've seen on your Instagram account that you already have been in Brussels, also in the Parliament. Like imagining you are a member of the Parliament. What do you expect? How is the daily life being a member in the European Parliament, working with politicians from different countries? Which is quite different than regional parliament or national parliament. You work with people from different countries within different delegations. Maybe you could explain your expectations about that, and maybe you could also explain on what topics you would like to work, and maybe also in which committee.
So my expectation, what I really also love about the European Parliament, is that it's so much orientated on the policies you want to make, that you don't think in logic of groups and everything, that you have an idea you want to put forward, and you talk with everyone to reach out for it. So that, for example, with the discussion on the copyright that we had, like when we saw the results of the votings, that it was mixed all over the groups, so that the dialogue and the organization of majorities, it's much more dynamic than in national parliaments, where you have the group, and if the group says you vote for it, you vote like this, but it's more dynamic. And this is what I really like, that it's about talking about policies and organizing majorities for the little questions. And of course it's challenging and more work, but this is what I really like about it, that it's so dialogue orientated in a way.
No, like not, at least not officially, no grand coalition in the European Parliament, right? And on which committee would you like to work, or at least at which subject, which topics would you like to work?
So, which is very important for me, is the question of migration policies, because I think it's a shame for the European values that we right now are not even in the situation that we can prevent people dying at our borders. So I think this is a huge duty we have to do, and it's very important for me as a subject, that I want a project that has as a core values the protection of human rights and the security of human dignity, that we can organize people to be rescued in the Mediterranean Sea when they are drowning. And I think this is a huge task where we have to find solutions. And maybe I can talk later about solutions. And also the question about organizing a foreign policy together. That I think it's important that Europe as a peace project makes itself aware that if we talk about common security for foreign policies as Europe, it's not something we put up national things. That it means that we have to give competences to the European level, and that we have to shift also money to do so, that we not only can talk about how we want to have more responsibility of Europe, the European Union, on different topics, that we also have to say, then we have to transfer money to that we don't, that it cannot be organized on the costs of other projects, this is actually very important, and I think, of course, a lot about arm controlling. That we have the situation that we have 130 weapon systems all over Europe, while the US has 30, and we see it's a huge inefficiency. And I don't want that we strive for giving more and more money for weapons. And the opposite, I think we have to organize it to be more effective and with the goal to have a de-armization on the European continent. So I think this is like projects where there will happen a lot in the next years, and I think that we as a European Union, we have to be aware of the thing that we have a peace project, and we are not something that we don't want arms to solve problems. We want people talking, solving conflicts, as we are the project that proves that dialogue and economic exchange is what secures peace, and not weapons. And
What do you think about? It has been recently, or also it ended last year, discussed a lot about a European army. What do you think about that? Should Europe has its own army, and how would it work? Like, there's also something called NATO.
I think I think it's sad that the discussion about a common European foreign policy is always just restricted to the questions: do we have a European army or not? Because I think that the European army is something that might be the case after a process that has to start now, about how we organize a specialization of the national armies in order to have more effective use of the resources we also already invest in our armies in Europe. So putting up specialities and would, my opinion, lead to the process of having a European army, but it's not something that you can put up tomorrow. That won't happen because there's not the infrastructure to organize that. So I think that we have to talk about a way where this is a result of something, and not about putting up a European army tomorrow.
So, what is about, like, talking about foreign policy? What do you think how Europe or the European Union should behave towards Russia or the Crimea crisis? Is this also something you would like to work on if you think about European politics?
Yes, of course, because we kind of see, I think, the duty of not having this block situation in the world anymore. That I don't want the European integration on the foreign policy issues, not on the sake of being another block within the blocks, with the US, with Europe and China and Russia on the other side. That I want that Europe is able to build bridges, and I think it's only possible if we keep in dialogue and exchange with Russia, and I think it's also only possible if we if we want to secure or to restore peace, or to protect peace on the European continent. It's important because, of course, there's also, based on the history of some European countries, they are scared of Russia to have too much power in a way, and I think it's very important to have like a very serious dialogue with all these channels to secure the peace and the feeling of security in the countries on the Russian border, but also to have which is very important, I think, why you always have to stay in dialogue even with difficult regimes, that there's a civil society in Russia that also needs our attention and our support. And I think you only can reach out to civil societies if you stay in contact also with the regime.
Okay. Thinking about foreign policy and the Eastern Bloc, do you have like some historian social democrat politicians who serve as a role model in this year? Is there some? I don't know. I had to think about Willy Brandt.
Yes.
Is what do you remember about his policy, or how would you consider what he did into future of the European Union?
Is this approach change through dialogue, that if you stay in dialogue, if you stay close in contact, that you are able to change the political majorities in other countries, and um, the influence you have. So of course Willy Brandt is a huge figure, if you talk especially about Eastern policies, and how the role in Europe is in such a situation. So yes, of course you learn from them, but I'm always like a person that looks not in the past but also in the future, because I think there are a lot of inspiring people. I have contact to young progressives in the Ukraine and in Russia, and I also admire what they do and how they see, and what is their view on Europe, and what the promise of working together is for them. So this is always also something that motivates me, and not only have role models in the past, but also having inspiring people in the now.
Staying in foreign policy, what do you think about the situation of migration in European Union about the last years, and how should the future look like? What measures could the European Union take?
As I said, I think it's a shame for European values that we cannot agree on protecting people from drowning in the Mediterranean Sea. We let people actually die as a European project because there are some egos and European leaders that cannot agree on a consent. This is the problem. That they are not even ready to make compromises to save Europe. Human lives, and this is something that has to change. And I think the most shameful part is that there are cities, there are villages ready to take the refugees that are drowning in the sea right now, because we don't rescue them. There are people who feel or who support this core value of saving human lives, and we don't let them, because the national states, they cannot agree on a measurement of distribution, although the European Parliament made the proposition. The solution is there, but it's just blocked. And what I think is the first step, and what I would be the first thing I want to do in the European Parliament, is that we have to organize that the cities and the villages that are standing up and saying we want to take refugees, that they have the possibility to do so without the approval of the member state. And what we propose as Social Democrats is a fund on the European level that supports these villages and cities to take refugees and invest in the infrastructure of which is a benefit for everyone. So but I think what it is needed in Europe is that we change the narrative, that we don't define migration as something that we do because we are good-hearted, just because it also benefits us. Because if you protect European values, if you take refugees, you get something from that, from the European Union. So this might change the dialogue we have, because right now we see, especially in the southern European states, that the people are put against each other. That they say, if you have refugees, you don't have social security, because we don't have money for everything, and this has to stop, I think.
Okay. So you would not, you would avoid, like, I wonder, or I thought about countries who the government, like in Hungary or in Poland, who are quite sure that they don't want to receive migrants.
Yeah.
How do you handle that? How do you talk there like blocks and egos? How do you solve that?
In what, like, the solution I made is that they don't have to approve it. Like, you make a possibility to take refugees without the approval of the national state. So I think that the point is that if you get support from the European Union, if you take refugees, also someone like Orban will understand that's a benefit you do, if you save people, if you act in European values, the European Union gives you support for that. And this is what I was talking about the change of narrative, that if you do something, if you open a way for some villages and cities that want to take refugees to do so, other people or other villages and cities might say, we want that too, we want this support too, we want to take refugees. This is what I was meaning with the change of narrative. As I said, we have too long saw that there won't be a solution within the member states because everyone is blocking it. So we have to find other creative solutions, and the proposal, what I said with the solidarity cities, with the fund on a European level, is a creative way to make people, even people who are not for taking migration, solving the problem now, see that it's a benefit if they would do it.
Okay. You mentioned it, the Mediterranean Sea, and that people are dying there. What would be approach or a measure to solve that?
We need, again, a mission from the European level that is dedicated to sea rescue, because what we are having right now is, or not having right now anymore since yesterday, the mission Sophia, which is a military operation, which is actually got the task to have a look at the smugglers' storms and avoid smugglers from doing their business. And the point next to it was that they was also rescuing lives. So the sea rescue was just an consequence on what they were doing with the smugglers. So, but this is stopped now because they couldn't. The member states couldn't agree on a measurement of distribution. So. We have to organize sea rescue, and we have to have a sea rescue mission because it's happening. People are fleeing to the Mediterranean Sea, and we have to protect human lives. I think this is something I wouldn't discuss at all, because you cannot let people die, and you have to organize sea rescue and safe passages to have the right or the secure right to seek for asylum, because it's a human right.
Okay. So I found on your page also that you have, or not on your page, but in general, that you have also a position about, European social policy, and that you that you have a position on European minimum wage. Could you explain also that?
Yes, it's basic. It's basis on the belief that we as social democrats think that people who work on our continent, they shouldn't work poor. That if you work, you should have the possibility to live on that. And what we propose is a European minimum wage, which is orientated on the 60% average income in every member state, because this is what is said to be the poverty boundary. So we don't want people that work to live under the poverty line. So this is actually the instrument to deal with that. That you have that you continue the story of what kind of Europe we want to have, because it's basically it. We were open to have the market together. We let people, workers, companies go through the borders and interact with each other. But what we also have to define is that if you want to make economy on our continent, you have to pay decent wages, and you have to have social standards if you want to be part of this game. So this is what we want to achieve with that we want to have a basic rule that there's a minimum wage for people.
But how would this work? Like, is there one general wage for all countries? Because the economic situation is quite different. There are big gaps among the member states. Or what's the concrete measure? How does it look?
It's based on the 60% average income in the several member states. So, for example, for Germany, it would be 12 euros, but it depends on which country it is. So that you just have, it's actually a quota more, that you have 60% of the average income to be the minimum wage in every member state.
Okay, now
Yeah, it's just not one for everyone, because as you said, the living conditions are too different right now, but it's based on the average income of people in the countries.
Okay. Cool. Last question. If you think now about, you're quite young. If you think now about the vision of Europe, what kind of Europe, like long term, would you like to live? And what's your vision on Europe?
I want a Europe where people, not only companies can move freely, but also people can move freely, and people have the opportunity to have social security and the possibility to look positive in their futures, because they know they have a strong community that supports them even if they fall. And I think that solidarity is one thing we have to strengthen in the European Union, and for that we need radical change in the European Union, because we don't have the trust of people that the European Union is democratic enough, is transparent enough, that I feel connected to what it is doing and what it's the effects on my life by this project, and that we have to change that we have something. Have to have something like a European society where we know that there are things that we can do better together. There are things that can be organized in the local area better. So this is actually the thing that I want. The vision of a more social, more just Europe, where everyone benefits, and not only where the many and not the few, actually, which is the thing. The many and not the few are benefiting from a uniting Europe, and not only the few.
Cool. Delara, thank you for this interview and good luck with your elections. Bye.